Welcome to the Healthy Hustling Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Eric Broadworth, and today I have with me Rory Sadoff and Dr. Margaret O'Neil. Rory is a life coach and somatic therapy practitioner, and Dr. Margaret O'Neil is a physical therapist like myself. And this is going to be a very different conversation than ones we have had in the past because we are going to be talking about somatic therapy. And this is a topic that I honestly do not know much about, but I like learning new things. And I think that I have a lot of questions about this, to be honest. I think that I'm going to learn a lot from this conversation. So, just if you're listening, so you know, there's no agenda or anything like that. I'm going in with like a curious, open mind and to see what Rory and also Dr. Margaret has to say about somatic therapy. And I'm excited because I've heard a lot of really good things, to be quite honest. I was doing a little bit of digging beforehand on somatic therapy. Um, but I think there's a lot that apparently we don't know. So, Rory, I guess does that and Margaret both does that explain it, or tell me what do you think from there?
Yeah. I will clarify that I am not a therapist. So, somatic therapy is a modality. The best way that I can describe it is, people, I often get the question, people come into my practice, what's the difference between this and talk therapy? I've seen a talk
Mhm.
therapist for years. How is this different? And the most simple way that I can put it is that in my practice, SE, somatic experiencing, is the first modality that I will pull on when working with clients. And it's really a body based approach. And so, talk therapy is, processing, thinking, maybe you're doing CBT, EMDR, and nervous system work and somatic experiencing is building the body's capacity to let the body do the talking and start to metabolize all of the things that we've held onto, trauma, big T, little t, all of the unprocessed memory that the body and the tissues and the fascia holds.
Okay. Margaret, do you have anything to add to that?
Um, I think with my personal work with Rory, um, it was so much different to talk therapy because I have done that as well, and I do find that helpful. But having someone to help me realize, okay, where am I storing this stress or overwhelm, and how can I help to release it rather than just constantly thinking and thinking? Because especially for me, I tend to overthink, and so it can kind of get stuck in there. So being able to work with Rory, a somatic practitioner, really helped me overcome the stress and overwhelm that I had in my life.
Yeah. So, maybe I think you take it from here, Margaret, as to how this conversation, because you're the one who coordinated this conversation. So,
Yeah.
if you want to explain how this conversation even came to be and how we're doing this episode here.
Yeah. Rory and I worked together for about 2 years. I was going through some personal stuff in my life and was trying to do stuff on my own, and I couldn't. With everything that I was trying, felt like I was stuck. And I knew that I needed someone to help me. And so I found Rory through a company online, and we did a lot of stuff together. But definitely with the personal stuff that I was dealing with in my life, Rory, truly one of the best people I've ever worked with in my life, from in the health and wellness space, because she really understood from the beginning, like everything that I was dealing with and how to go about treating it and not just acting like it was all in my head.
So, if you don't mind me asking, like what kind of things were you dealing with? It sounds like anxiety, but I don't want to speak for you. Like what kind of things,
Yeah.
you don't have to give specifics too much, but as far as like sounds like anxiety. And then had you tried, talk therapy before? Had you tried CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT before?
Yeah. So I had done talk therapy from like 2019 up to the beginning of 2021. And it was helpful in some ways, but I still felt really stuck. And so then with Rory, we worked together for those 2 years after that. And it was the best decision that I've ever made working with a somatic practitioner.
Nice. And when you say stuck, what were your symptoms?
Some of them were uh, more on the mental side, like anxiety and stress, but I also
Mhm.
had physical symptoms like bloating, some of those more like IBS symptoms. I had a lot of hip pain that wasn't due to any type of physical injury, things like that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Rory, how did you get into what you're doing with uh coaching
Yeah.
and yeah, the in somatic therapy and somatic work, all that?
Yeah, I think a big reason Margaret and I resonated so much with each other was we had a kind of similar history a bit. So I grew up an athlete. I grew up with older brothers, um, and I was playing Division One sports and stopped, and so it kind of created a bit of an identity crisis. And then I developed an eating disorder, and a very binge restrict disordered eating pattern, and so my body was this thing that I was kind of punishing. And then I got into functional health and started to realize how I was beating my body up and not doing actual healthy things and just blasting past body cues and under eating and over moving really affected my hormones. So my background is in kind of functional health. And then this was such a missing piece for me. So I was doing all the right things health wise, and there was just symptoms that wouldn't get better. So for instance, I like lost my menses for about 3 years. And I found an amazing somatic therapist back in 2017 that like opened my eyes in this being a healing modality. I didn't go into my education route for it just yet, but I was in the functional health space, being a functional health coach and seeing so many autoimmune fertility cases that I was like, I need to be able to support these women in a bigger way. I primarily work with women, not exclusively. And it's been the missing piece. And I've been able to really be kind of a supportive part of a team, right? It's like you have your doctor, you have your talk therapist, you have your physical therapist, you have your nutritionist. So I'm a big believer is this is like one part of the story, but I often find that it gets missed or not fully worked with in a way that I think our bodies are meant to thrive.
Who would benefit most? Like, who's the ideal person to go through this?
Every human who has a nervous system.
Do you specialize at all
I
in?
do specialize. I work primarily with women.
Okay.
Uh, so physical symptoms that they can't seem to kind of understand. And to Margaret's point, talk therapy is a really great place to start because you can't work with something that you're not aware of. Well, you can, but it's more work to do because you're working with something that you haven't actually brought into your cognitive awareness, right? We know that the brain is or survival organ. It's wired for survival. And so if we can cognitively become aware of the things that get us stuck or uncomfortable or keep us in these same patterns, the methodology to work through it from a nervous system perspective becomes a bit safer, if we'll use that word, for your own body because your brain understands the work that we're doing. So a lot of the work that I start to do with clients is a ton of psychoeducation. So they understand, what are we working on with the nervous system and how does it make sense to them so that their bodies can consent, if you will.
Yeah. So, can you give, I guess, a brief description of how we can hold trauma and stress in our bodies? And there's a pretty popular book out there, right?
Body keeps the score.
Yeah, Body Keeps Score. Is that it?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to, I guess, explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So essentially, our bodies can go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So fawn is the mammalian way in which, we people please, we appease. Um, and our bodies are really wired for survival. And so what happens is my definition of trauma, and Peter Levine, who has kind of coined the term somatic experiences definition of trauma, is something that was too much, too fast, or too soon. And I would add that not enough of something can also be traumatic. I think trauma is kind of this buzzword right now, but that's my definition of it. And so in the moment of an experience that is too much, too soon for your system, your body's doing the best it can to just get through it. And sometimes that is survival, but it's not what allows your body to thrive. And so, how that later can show up in your system can be chronic pain, chronic tension with like no medical explanation. So, I have a lot of women who are like, I'm doing all the things and nothing's working. Digestive issues, migraines and headaches, insomnia, sleep issues, feeling totally disconnected from your body. And then on more of this emotional side, you can be like overreactive, very angry, totally withdrawn. And then again, on the more extreme side, you can see addiction and abuse or, yeah, things like that.
Interesting. Um,
Do
so
you, oh,
go
sorry.
ahead. No, no, you go
Um,
ahead.
so obviously you work more with women, but do you notice any difference between men and women in the way that they hold all of this in their bodies?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there are definitely gender responses that are a bit more stereotypical.
Yeah.
And I think that's really due to just gender roles in our society.
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
actually think there's a huge nervous system difference, but gender roles in society will play an impact, and then hormones play a huge impact. So men typically will withdraw a little bit. I think men are more depressed because it's a little less quote unquote acceptable, right? We're dealing with this like BS stigma around like don't be weak or like don't be a baby, right? I think so much we're working through all of those stories that maybe we experienced as children and so forth. And so from a nervous system standpoint, no. But I think there's so many other things that are layered on top of that that talking about it and processing, we have a lot to overcome in those areas. Yeah.
Interesting. So what does a session, I guess I'm gonna back that up. How do we know if like the body is storing trauma? You kind of mentioned, is it just those symptoms? Is it other things like Margaret had weird sensations? I will say this, like I get like so um I tore my pec in 2021. Then I had like an umbilical hernia repair in 22.
Mm,
And then in 23, had back surgery, ended up with a herniated disc.
yeah.
And I find that I am extremely cautious with movement. Like I have to warm up really well, and kind of no matter what I'm doing, I am like I'll like fidget with my shoulder, and like I haven't torn my bicep, right? But I'll be like overly conscious that I could tear my bicep or did I do something, just because also as a physical therapist, I see people tear their bicep fairly frequently. And then things like with my back, like I will, it's like stiff, but it's been overall like much better, but I'll still like bend down very carefully, right, to pick things up versus just kind of like moving. And there's always a little hesitancy, and I
Mhm.
will notice that I will fixate. And I don't know if this is a part of also just having like ADHD and anxiety and that kind of thing, but I'll fixate and I'll like notice it. I'm like, oh, I think I did something. And then I'm like, what I do is I'll give myself 24 hours and I'm like, you didn't feel a pop, you didn't do any of these things. You're likely fine. We're gonna come back to this in 24 hours and see how you feel. And usually then I like forget about it. And then like the day later, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm good. Cool, sweet.
Yeah.
And that's like helped me to process some things that, as far as what I'll freak out because I've been like I tore my pec again. And there have been instances where I felt things have happened, but overall I think it
Yeah.
is fine, and in the nervous system it works in wild ways, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, I'm sure when you've torn or hurt yourself, there's a bit of shock to the system, right? And so
Oh my,
you're kind of over coupling is what we call it. It's when one thing happens and then we have a certain response. And so now pain, maybe in any part of your body, is now overcoupled with like, oh my God, I injured this. Oh my gosh, I tore it, right? So it's kind of this like it's a compensatory strategy, if you
Yeah,
will.
it won't
Really,
even be like pain. It'll be
yeah.
interesting. It'll be like a discomfort or
Mhm.
a sensation. But I did when I tore my pec, I was like pretty much going into shock after
Yeah.
that on the way to go see pretty much the surgeon. Luckily with my contacts, I got into a surgeon within like 30 minutes of it happening. But yeah, I was on the way and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, I think I'm gonna pass out. I remember
Yeah.
that car ride specifically. So
Yeah, and surgery is one of the most traumatic things that you can experience. So what
Mhm.
happens and what I've seen, and I can talk a little bit about a classic SE model. It's called the T model. This is like, I think before you were asking and then you backed up, but like what happens in a session, and I can kind of
yeah, I
explain
was
that.
gonna ask, what does the session look like?
Yeah. So let's just say that we were in session together and we were exploring this story of you tearing your pec, going and getting in with a surgeon almost immediately. Is that an accurate story?
Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
have surgery right away, but I
Okay.
was getting evaluated and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay. So that's all very like quickly happening. And so what we could do for a session is you would start to tell that story and we would track your nervous system as you told that story. And I would be lovingly interrupting you. And we call it the T model in somatic experiencing, but I would be lovingly interrupting you through that story and we would just be tracking. So you could be like, I got in the car and we started to go to the surgeon. And I'd be like, okay, what's happening in your body as you're telling that? And you might talk about your increased heart rate. And so we're just giving the body some time to kind of metabolize that experience. And surgery itself, you're going under and like you're shutting off your nervous system's ability to fight, right? So I've worked a lot with clients in session when we've worked with surgery, and like they'll lay on a table because I do touch work as well, and they'll want to kick, they'll want to fight back, they'll want to complete the response that their body couldn't complete because they were, under because they were getting a surgical procedure. So I know it sounds a bit woo woo.
Hey, I think that there's definitely something to it, and I don't doubt that at all. Margaret, you've been through it, right? Like what,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, if you do mind, then speak up. That's by all means okay, but like, yeah, what was your experience with the sessions like?
Yeah, well, I was going to say first, I'm living proof that the woo-woo does help and work. Um, I kind of touching on what Rory said are similar stories of being collegiate athletes. Had gotten so used to putting how my body felt to the side because I had a job to do and I had things that I had to accomplish. And so I didn't I think the first time that we had started doing this, Rory was like, "Well, where do you feel that? Or what do you feel?" And I was like, "I don't know." Like I genuinely had never been in touch with my body like that to ask, "Okay, how does my body actually feel when I'm doing this thing?" So that was the biggest part is getting in touch with myself to be able to answer that question. Where do I feel this sensation and what is that sensation? So most of our sessions, once I was able to get into that, then going through whatever experience it was that we want to talk about, whether it was being a collegiate athlete, talking about my disordered eating, like childhood stuff, just involved me closing my eyes and then talking through a situation that I remember. And then, like Rory said, lovingly pausing and saying, okay, where do you feel that? What do you feel? And then as we talked, it all evolved.
Hmm. Interesting. And yeah, so from my understanding then somatic therapy, it is like talk therapy, but you're really being in tune then with what you're sensing and what you're feeling. Is that accurate?
It is, and somatic is a buzzword. And so somatic, like soma just means body in Greek.
Right.
And so anybody can put somatic in front of anything and it can mean a different thing. So I can speak to like somatic experiencing. It's Peter Levine's Institute. It's a 3-year program. You need about 500 hours of like practice with other humans and, all of that. So it depends how people practice. So one-on-one sessions, I work 100% virtual. I do have some people who I see in kind of my local area. but it can involve touch, like a supportive touch, or it can just be, yeah, sitting across via Zoom and tracking your own system. And I can witness the person in the screen across and I'll track their own system. But yeah, it's typically body first, right? So we're actually just giving enough space and time for the body to be heard rather than just the story and the meaning making of it.
Yeah. Um, awesome. So are there any specific techniques that you use in sessions or like in right, I guess in with physical therapy, right, you have a million different techniques. Like is it the very similar with somatic practitioners or how does that work?
Yeah, again, I can probably more so speak with confidence about the work that I do because I've been taught a certain way and then I have also had some incredible mentors along the way that I've taken bits and pieces from. So when I'm doing SE based work, so somatic experiencing work, I'm using breath, I'm using movement, I'm using sound, I'm using energy and presence. And so bringing all of that infused into our sessions is a modality that I really believe in. And then on more of kind of a, I guess another modality is IFS. So it's internal family systems. I do know that Margaret and I have done some of that work. And so that's parts work, and that's really developed by a psychotherapist. And so it's more processing. But again, we're kind of getting into the subconscious. We're welcoming in a bit of movement there. So those are two big modalities because I do a lot of inner child work in my practice.
Okay, interesting. So it sounds like there can be individual and group sessions. That's correct? And then who would benefit from like individual versus group?
Yeah, so personally, I've been doing this for 7 years. And so as I refine what I do when I'm serving people in a group space and supporting people in a group space, I have kind of a quote unquote prerequisite that I've worked with them one on one before. Because in the group, I can't like I can attune to the group collectively, but I can't track someone if I'm with 8 other people. And so I never want to send somebody into a worse state than when they came, right? Because
Mhm.
I'm also trained to, okay, if I'm going to touch into what I call the trauma vortex, I need to support and stabilize so that they feel, grounded and or I'm inviting them to support themselves and stabilize themselves. So I always do one-on-one work before I do any group work. It just feels, especially online, it feels ethical from where I sit. But I think so much healing happens in community. And so I think after you've built some awareness of your own system, jumping into group work, or I host retreats, I do one-on-one retreats and group retreats. Um, it's a great way to just be surrounded by community who's doing this work alongside you.
Yeah. Um,
How do you, um, I guess, so like you and I worked together over Zoom online, like you
Yeah.
said,
Mhm.
and I always felt so supported. How do you get that through like online
Yeah.
versus in person?
Yeah. So Zoom offers it from where I sit, and most of my work has been on Zoom anyway. So it's not like I mean, I do again some sessions one on one, and obviously my retreats are in person. Zoom offers a nice buffer. I think when you're touching into some big stuff, big trauma, little trauma, whatever it is, but this really, it's so personal. So Zoom offers, I think, this buffer a bit of like I'm in my own bubble. I don't have to like share energy with this person. I don't need to have like this vulnerability hangover because I'm just,
Mhm.
with this person. So I like it for that reason. Um, and I find that the first few sessions that I have with clients is a lot about building a lot of rapport and trust because so much trauma is relational, happens with another person. And so much of the work that I'm doing with people is actually renegotiating what is intimacy? What is it like to be seen and vulnerable with another person? And so that's a big part of the beginning work that I do with clients.
Mhm.
um, that's awesome. So what are, I guess, some of the ways that it sounds like for impacting emotional, mental, and physical health, obviously that's a benefit, right? What are some of the typical cases or the most interesting cases you've seen?
Yeah.
I'm
Mm.
curious.
Yeah, I love, so much of this work is less tangible than other modalities, right? It's like, oh, this thing is broken and not functioning. Oh, I'm going to go to PT and we're going to restore mobility and, break up scar tissue, things like that, as an example, as a parallel. So I think the easiest way that I describe this work to people is, people, women specifically, come to me a lot with lack of boundaries, or they're, dysregulated, or they're just highly anxious. And so when you work with the nervous system, you're building capacity in your own system to really be resilient with stress and kind of handle what comes your way. So the charge to certain things that bring a lot of emotion or anger or stress typically diminish. That's a really great way to track how we're doing and how the nervous system is doing. Is the charge in my body the same as it used to be around this person or this relationship I have? I've seen it do incredible things for women on their fertility journey. I've seen it be really impactful for weight loss. I think there's an energetic to holding weight as well. What else? Reversing. I have a really cool case where I worked alongside her with a functional health coach, and she reversed her Hashimoto's. So I think, to me, I love working on the not tangible and not the like physical health, and then seeing everything in the physical health get better as well.
Huh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Reversing Hashimoto's.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Any cancer?
I haven't worked with cancer personally, no.
Hmm.
I do know people have. I do know people in my community who have worked with cancer, but I have not myself.
And just curious, when do you see with your work is insomnia pretty uh typical with people, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's super typical. My partner actually struggles with sleep. Um, he's like kind of on board with what I do, but like, we're getting him there. It's like a little,
Yeah.
I'm kind of reeling him in. I'm giving him all the science and the data because he's a man, and no offense, I think they like a little bit more of that. So there's a few things. I mean, I think it depends what type of insomnia. Is it like my body's keeping me up, my thoughts are keeping me up? So I think identifying like what is kind of the root to the insomnia can be
Hmm.
helpful. And then what I would do is I would start like way before sleep. Like, what does pre-sleep look like? Like, what are we implementing way before we're actually like getting into bed and turning off the lights? So I haven't directly worked with people, and most of my cases are not women or men coming in and going, "Hey, I want to solve this thing," because that doesn't feel ethical to me. It really is an exploration. So much of my work is we're exploring, we're curious. We don't actually know maybe how good it can get. And so we don't have this like direct thing. It's not that transactional, if you will. So the women who have come to me, to work on fertility, or to work on the woman who was working on her Hashimoto's, didn't come to me for her Hashimoto's. It's just kind of a side effect of doing this work and working with the nervous system. So
How
I didn't
often
really
does it
answer your
work?
question.
How
Go
often
ahead.
does it work for fertility? And are you typically seeing with fertility, like are these women have they've been through testing and they're typically normal, or they have endometriosis, or what is that?
Yeah, all cases. So I will say I am typically almost never the only person working with that woman on her fertility. They have a functional health coach. They are working with a doctor. So many different areas. Women who are working, and again, because I'm focusing more on the nervous system, a big question that I will ask somebody who's working with fertility is like, I'm doing the mental work and the emotional work behind what's driving fertility. So what happens if you can't get pregnant? Then what? Right? Like, what does tapping into that grief feel like? Because so much of what happens in the nervous system is we're grasping for something. Like, maybe we want a baby so bad, right? We want to give birth. We want to be a mother so bad that we're grasping and we're stressing. It's all we can see. It's all we can focus on. And so we're constantly stressed and constantly thinking that our body is broken, right? So I'm working more on that than I am working directly with like, what are we doing? But to answer your question, endometriosis, IVF, grief for, miscarriage. So it kind of is in every pocket of that. But, my kind of forte is working on the emotions and the emotional roller coaster that goes with fertility or potential infertility.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, how often do you see it turn around? Like, what would you say do you have is there a success rate that you can tout with it?
For fertility specifically.
Yeah.
Um, I can't give I'm just kind of running through my roster right now of clients and thinking, I mean, I think I've seen over a 50% success rate for women who want to get pregnant. And again, I'm not the only one working with them. They're working with either a
Okay.
doctor, a fertility specialist, a functional health coach. I'm on their team. And again, I'm kind of covering the bucket of emotional and mental health while they're also getting kind of their physical health worked with and worked through. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as a physical therapist, right?
Yeah.
How do I recognize, or how do other physical therapists recognize, like Margaret and myself, when someone would benefit from somatic therapy?
When you're doing all the right things and you're giving them, quote unquote, right. But yeah, when there is maybe more of like a mental block, I see a lot of people who have all the tools to potentially feel better, but maybe they're, stuck a bit in their victimhood consciousness and like can't tell. They don't even know that. So I would say when you've tried all the things, I get a lot of people who are like, I've tried all the things and nothing's working, but the willingness needs to be there, right? Like somebody has to be willing to get uncomfortable and build a relationship and kind of go exploring into their past if they want to do this work. So I'm not doing anything for anybody. They're doing it all. I'm just kind of a loving guide and mirror and witness, and I obviously offer tools and expertise, but that willingness is so big.
What do you look for, Margaret?
Sorry, what was the question?
What do you look for people if like you're gonna refer someone to, say, Rory
Somatic.
or anyone
Yeah.
else? Yeah, what do you typically look for?
I would say I look for someone who is attached to their diagnosis or pathology, disease, whatever the realm is. I think patients who are very like, I have this thing, I have um, this hip pain, or I have a torn rotator cuff. When they're so attached to that, that's where I'm like, I really think that they could benefit because, I mean, from my own personal experience, I was attached to things, and I found it to be helpful. But I think when we get so caught up in this, I have this problem and I am this problem,
Mhm.
I think that is when it could be the most beneficial.
Was yours the hip thing?
Um, no, not necessarily. Mine was more I'm, I have an eating disorder. I'm broken. My body can't be healed. I'm stuck.
Who had you tried to see for that prior to Rory?
I had gone in and seen my doctor, and I also lost my menses for 3 years due to a disordered eating. And I had gone to see a doctor and done blood work, thyroid panel, all the things. And they said, oh, like these are all normal. You're fine. And I'm like, I'm clearly not fine. I haven't had my menses in 3 years and had a bunch of other physical symptoms, like I said. So, um, had seen them and then like I said, had seen a talk therapist as well.
Did the talk therapist help, or did you um so I'm just curious, why go see Rory if you were seeing a talk therapist? Obviously they're different, right? But I'm just trying to,
Mhm.
especially someone with little knowledge and background on this topic, why should someone see both, or should someone go see Rory if they failed talk therapy? Someone go see Rory first and then to talk therapy? Yeah, what does that look like? Does that make sense? I'm not trying, and I
Yeah.
realize that everything is very integrated, right? Like you should
Hmm.
have a health team. And
Yes.
Rory, I think you've hit that very well of like you ideally in the perfect world, you've got this team of providers and they're all talking to each other, but healthcare or sick care or whatever you want to call it is much more complex than that. And providers are so uh overworked. I will say like it for the most part, I try to do my best talking to other people's like physician and following up and stuff like that. But I don't talk to everyone's physician, and if I had to, it would be that would be nearly impossible. I don't know how you communicate with that many people, but I do try to do that with as many as that I can, especially if they're complex cases, and I think the physician needs to know. But sorry, I didn't mean to go down that little rabbit hole there, Margaret. But yeah, if you don't mind, I guess mentioning talk first, somatic. Yeah, how do
Yeah,
you handle
yeah. Um, I think that the doing the talk therapy beforehand, I think Rory had touched on this, was helpful for me to realize, okay, what are all the things that I am dealing with? Just as someone who can be quote unquote so in my head, having someone to talk and get those things out was helpful because I think if I had just immediately started with somatic therapy, I think I wouldn't have known all the things that I was dealing with. But then I got to a point where it just it felt like I was just talking and talking in circles. And it didn't, and that's nothing to say, again, nothing against talk therapy by any means. I recommend it for so many patients and everyone. But I was kind of going in circles
it?
of talking about things, but not seeing,
Sounds like maybe you were plateaued.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, interesting. And then you mentioned your hip. Did your hip resolve with this? Was
Yes.
and did the
Yeah.
hip have mechanical issues or was it just random pain?
So I tore my labrum in my left hip. So I did have surgery. I had that repaired in the end of 2018. So I did have that history. And I think the hip pain had more to do with the stored trauma, if you will, or the stored overwhelm of the personal relationships that I was dealing with rather than the physical thing. Because I mean, immediately, like after I had that hip surgery, I felt amazing. I that was great for me. But working through the surgery itself, like Rory had talked about, your nervous system turned off and you can't respond to any of it. So we went through some of that as well.
Okay, cool.
But
And
yeah, I haven't had hip pain since.
yay.
Interesting. That's pretty wild. And
And
I
I will say,
oh,
just echoing that, women store a lot of just energy in their hips. It's kind of our center of our body, and it's really an extension of the womb space and the cervix. And so I see a lot of women who deal with a lot of whether it be PMS pain or cramps or hip pain, chronic hip pain. Because unfortunately, I work a lot with abuse of many sorts, whether it's physical violation or yeah, and so it's a big piece that's typically active in a lot of women, I will say.
okay. Interesting. Yeah, and I definitely believe that. Well, um, this has been super insightful. So I think, I guess, are there any other areas or questions that you have, Margaret, or things that you want
Yeah.
to speak on, Rory?
I guess I did want to talk about we had touched on this earlier, but the word trauma, because it's such a buzzword, how do you go about explaining that to your patients without having them like grasp onto it as a form of like as their diagnosis or I
Yeah.
have this thing that I can't overcome.
It's interesting. I've actually seen a majority of people who do the complete opposite, have completely um, pretended that some of the experience that they've had are like not that big of a deal. And so I actually deal with a lot of clients who are like, I'll get over it. It's fine. Like, I'll just keep pushing. And so there's a big, like, wait, hold on. That's a pretty big deal. Like, let's just give some spaciousness for that to land. right? And even giving, I had a client earlier this morning where I was like, I could kind of in the coherent field, I was like, wow, that's big. Like I am going to take a second to even digest that on my end. And me acknowledging that that's a big deal, she had a whole emotional response, an emotional release because she's like, I've just completely swept over my head, So I don't see a lot of people who now there's victimhood consciousness
Mhm.
sometimes that can happen and right and so part of my job is going hey you have the power to make this choice and to empower yourself but I actually do see a lot of women specifically who kind of push through and act like it wasn't a big deal and stay busy and that's where the symptoms start to happen because they're just powering through. They're just like, I'll get over it. It's all good. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's a lot that you're carrying. Can you give it some space, to breathe and to process? And that's where the anxiety or the headaches or the insomnia that will typically start to manifest. For me, physical sensations for me are often a signal that I've completely disregarded something like a little whisper. And so now my body is like yelling at me. So
Well, I'm curious, have you, Rory, do you follow like David Goggins much?
I've read one of his books a while ago, but I don't think I follow him on social media.
Can't Hurt Me, probably.
Yeah.
That book.
Yep.
Um, so I'm curious as to your thoughts on some of that because I feel like mental resiliency, right, is extremely important. But I also think it's important to recognize things of when your your body's speaking up. So how do you know the difference, right? Like he
Yeah.
went and literally would run on broken legs and he'd
Yeah.
just if you've ever read his books, he's very vulgar, blunt,
Stoic.
like and personally, so kind of what I'm hearing is the people who will push it off, I'm fine, right, are probably more of your type A um
Perfectionist.
personalities. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean I will say that's like that's me. I would rather like grind and go run 20 miles than necessarily slow down and do yoga. Like slowing down is very difficult for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
But you tell me to just like tough it out. We're gonna wake up at 5 a.m. We're gonna get our workout in. We're gonna read. We're gonna push through. We're gonna work till 10, 11 p.m. Like part of it is I love doing that, right? And so how do you know what is being resilient with pushing through, but then when is it appropriate to do
Yeah.
that and when's it appropriate to back off?
Yeah, I love this question. Like I love it. And it's so nuanced because it really is so dependent on that person, where they're at, and their own system, right? So, I was just jotting down some notes, right? I will say females are not small men. Like we are working on a 28-day cycle and men are working on a 24-hour cycle in terms of hormones. And so I think a lot of research done even in my space is done on men. And so we're not really getting the full picture, I believe, in women's health. And so I think that can be a hard part of this all. So I definitely think there is a gender difference with that, right? So kind of going back to the earlier conversation, it's like the nervous system isn't necessarily different, but societal pressure, and then gender roles and hormones are massive in this. And so um, I would be really curious if you were my client, Eric. I would be exploring what happens with even the thought of slowing down? Like, what's the belief system around slowing down? Is it like, I'm lazy, I'm not worthy, I need to prove something? So, there's typically a belief or an actual physical discomfort with slowing down because something I hear a lot and everything I teach, I've gone through personally. I have a personal experience with it. So, my story also is like, I am an athlete and I perform and then I get love, particularly from my dad, right? It's like I'm good at something and then I get validation and I'm valued. And so much of my work as a female has been, how am I worthy if I don't, pick up a finger today, right? How is my worth not completely tied to my doing? So that's part of it. And then also I would say the our childhood experience. Like growing up, our nervous system, so this is a good stat that I think you'll like. Our nervous system, our vagus nerve that kind of dictates our entire nervous system, is not fully myelinated. So I'm sure you guys know what that is from being, wizards with the body, until you're about 7 years old. And so our ability to regulate ourselves is not fully developed until you're about 7 or 8. And so you're in constant co-regulation with your caregivers. And so much of our upbringing and how we cope with stress today is, how did our parents cope with stress or our caregivers cope with stress when we were growing up? What did we see? And then the last thing I'll say, because I know I'm saying a lot, but this is a great question, is if we slow down and feel it now, we don't have to deal with the ripple effect of not feeling it. So I'll give an example, right? It's like, let's just say somebody has a rupture in their relationship with their partner in the morning, and then they're rageful all day. They have road rage and it's like it's leaking out everywhere. Versus, what if they gave themselves 5 minutes to scream into a pillow or, punch a pillow or whatever, and just got some of that energy out instead of just letting it kind of ooze out all day. So I hope that somewhat answers your question, but it was a great question.
Yeah, no, that does. Yeah, and is yeah, I I don't know if you want to hear all of my problems. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, nor do you need
I
to,
just
but
yeah, I
worth
feel like as
exploring.
far as with I very much resonate though with like that David Goggins mindset of like I'm gonna push through this, I'm gonna grind this. You put a challenge in front of me, I'm gonna figure out a way. And it like I will uh it might take a minute, but I will be successful with whatever it is eventually. So with that though comes like trying to always be on, and that the body I know doesn't necessarily it'll catch up to you, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, this has been super insightful and helpful, and I feel like I already can think of a few people that should talk to you, probably myself. But what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they wanted to utilize you and your services?
Yeah. My email address is a great way. I also have just a link on Calendly where it's a no pressure 30-minute just discovery call to really talk about, especially if someone's listening to this podcast and there's interest and intrigue. A lot of the work that I do, again, is psychoeducation, right? Is explaining how is the nervous system responding to threat, and I guess, and especially around like who I'm speaking to and specifically their past lived experience. Yeah, so email's great. And
What's your email?
yeah, it's Rory, my first name, dot Sadoff, 13 at gmail.com. And then I can include a link to my discovery call. I'm active on Instagram. I do a lot of education and content there. And I'd love to just kind of gift your listeners if they want. I have a somatic library on my website, it's a locked page. I can give you the details for that and so that people can get access. But it's
Yeah,
basically, I add to it every month. There's probably about 15 practices that are about 2 minutes and under, just for like if you can identify like, oh, I'm stuck in flight. What's some movement pattern I can do for flight specifically, or fight, or certain things like that. So I'd love to just be able to gift that to anyone who's listening.
perfect. Yeah, we will include that. So if you are listening, it'll be in the description below, whether you're watching on YouTube or Spotify. You can find that in the description. I'll also include your email there. And then, Margaret, are you active on Instagram as much? How should people get a hold of you if they have questions?
Yes, I would say probably email is best. That's O'Neil Margaret 45 at gmail.com. But then I also do have Instagram as well, Marge underscore O'Neil. So yeah, if anyone wants personal reflections on my experience with somatic experiencing, specifically with Rory or just in general, please feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I hope everyone got a lot out of this conversation. I know I did. And hopefully, this will help anyone that's listening to learn more about themselves and also overcome
Mhm.
whatever issues it is that they're dealing with. Because sometimes those inner demons and the mental health and that side of things, the body is just so complex. And I truly believe that. And even as a physical therapist, like we do not do enough in school with talking about how injuries can affect the rest of someone's life. Like it's more than just an ankle, right? That it
Mhm.
can start to affect and compound and stuff like that. So this has been super insightful. Thank you so much for listening, and please follow them and contact them with their email in the description below.